Well, we are back with another set of Premier League predictions, this time for game week 10. But before we jump into that, we're going to take a look back at game week 9, see how I did, and see if I got any predictions right. I'm just going to jump straight into it with the Saturday fixtures and Liverpool versus Everton. Now, I predicted 2-1 to Liverpool. It's actually a 2-0 win. Liverpool claimed the Merseyside bragging rights, as I think we all expected. It was Salah again who dragged Liverpool to 3 points. And Everton went down to 10 men after a very silly challenge by Young, but managed to hang on until the 75th minute. Liverpool were lucky not to go down to 10 men themselves, but ultimately Salah sealed the win at the death and ensured the Merseyside bragging rights. And then we move on to Brentford versus Burnley. Now, I predicted 3-1 to Brentford. It's actually just 3-0. Brentford returned to winning ways after confidently seeing off Burnley. Maupay looks like a different player and was very unfortunate to have his goal chalked off, but Wiss was there to open the scoring and give the Bees hope. And Mbeumo doubled Brentford's lead in the 62nd minute, with Godos adding to Burnley's misery towards the end. A very assured win for Brentford, and a very important 3 points on the board for them. And then move on to Bournemouth versus Wolverhampton Wanderers. Now, I predicted 1-0 to Wolves. It's actually 2-1. Wolves put their stumble against Villa behind them with a very dominant win over the Cherries. Wolves applied the pressure early on, but it was Bournemouth who opened the scoring through a cheeky, dominant Solanke back heel. Wolves started strongly in the second half and were awarded with a goal early in the second half before Klasic won it late on. Bournemouth also got reduced to 10 men, which didn't help. And then we move on to Nottingham Forest versus Luton. I predicted 2-0 to Forest, and it was actually a 2-2 draw. And what did I say? Forest bottled a 2-0 lead to share the points with Luton. Forest were 2-0 up through a Chris Wood brace until the 83rd minute when Ogbene scored to half the deficit. And as soon as I saw that goal go in, I knew Forest were fucking it up. Adebayo equalised in the 90+2nd minute, and unfortunately that was that. Wood was on for a hat-trick, but unfortunately that was ruled out for offside, and was just the cherry on top of an absolutely woeful performance. The substitutions Cooper made really turned the game in Luton's favour. It was dreadful. And then we move on to Manchester City versus Brighton and Hove Albion. Now, I predicted 3-1 to City. It was actually just 2-1. City nipped their losing run in the bud as Alvarez opened the scoring within 7 minutes. And then, barely 10 minutes later, the Norwegian robot finally grabbed another Premier League goal. And some strike it was too, my god. Now, Fati did grab a goal back for Brighton, but that wasn't enough to inspire a comeback. Oh, and Kanji also saw red from a silly second yellow card, so yeah. I feel like we're seeing a lot more reds this season. It must be to do with the new rule changes, but we are seeing so many reds. We're only on the 10th match of this was the 9th week of the season, lads. Come on. And then we move on to Newcastle United versus Crystal Palace. Now, I predicted 2-0 to Newcastle. It was actually 4-0. It was another dominant win for Newcastle as they vanquished Crystal Palace up north. Jacob Murphy opened the scoring early on, and what an interesting goal it was as well. Gordon then doubled the hosts' lead after missing a sitter early on, with Langstaff then capitalising on a Guehi error just before half time. Things were kind of steady until Wilson truly finished off Palace in the 66th minute, and that was that. Another loss for Palace. It's not looking good, Brev. And then we move on to Chelsea versus Arsenal. And I predicted 3-1 to Arsenal. It was actually a 2-2 draw. And honestly, Chelsea performed quite well, but much like Forest, bottled a 2-goal lead. It was Palmer who opened the scoring from the spot after a handball was called against Saliba. Mudryk then doubled the hosts as his cross found the back of the net. Crazy goal though, fair play to him. Both teams had a couple of chances before Rice halved the deficit after pouncing on a misplaced pass from Sanchez. Trossard then equalised in the 84th minute, but neither side could find the winner, and the points ended up being shared in this London derby. And then we move on to Sheffield United versus Manchester United. Now, I predicted 2-0 to United. It's actually 2-1, and to be fair to Sheffield United, they did put up a good fight, but ultimately just couldn't overcome Manchester United. The Blades made a decent start, but it was Scott McTominay who opened the scoring in the 25th minute with what was quite a strange goal, to be fair. The Scotsman then gives away a penalty for handball, which McBurney dispatches to level the score. Both teams did have their fair share of chances, but it was United ultimately grabbed the winner. A Dalot strike from outside the box sealed all 3 points for Manchester United, and to be fair, it was a cracking goal. Then move on to Aston Villa versus West Ham United. I predicted a 2-2 draw. It was actually 4-1 to Villa. It was an assured win for Emery's men as they ran riot in Villa Park. Douglas Luiz opened the scoring on the half-hour mark, which put the hosts ahead. He then doubled the lead from the spot after Conte was brought down in the box. Bowen did manage to pull a goal back for Villa, but they responded well through Watkins before Bailey added another at the death to truly seal the Hammers' fate. And yeah, Villa are cooking, man. Who would have guessed? And finally, the Monday fixture of Tottenham versus Fulham. Now, I predicted 2-0 to Tottenham, and it was 2-0 to Tottenham. We left it till the end, but we finally nailed a prediction that ends our drought. Was it ever in doubt? Spurs go top with another assured win in the capital. It was all Spurs in the first half as Son opened the scoring before Maddison scored early into the second half to double the lead, and Spurs kept it steady throughout, and they claimed those all-important 3 points to not only go top, but to keep their perfect, well, not the perfect, but they haven't lost a game. Fulham did have some chances, but their finishing left a lot to be desired, and Vicario was just a brilliant keeper as well. So, yeah, Tottenham fully deserve to be top of the league, and they haven't lost a match yet, so they're still doing well. But yep, those have been my Game Week 9 Premier League predictions. I only got one correct, so not a great showing, and Nottingham Forest have given me depression. But aside from that, not a bad week of matches, to be fair. Some good results there. But we're going to move into Game Week 10, and I will say that before I go through these predictions, I know some of these sides are playing European football. That's not factored into my predictions because, well, I have to get this one out a bit earlier because I'm going away for a few days. So European football does not come into these results. I'm not sure they'll change the outcomes anyway, but it may seem some rotation, you know. But other than that, let's just jump into it. And we start off with the Friday fixture of Crystal Palace versus Tottenham. Tottenham bookends the week as they ended last week, and they begin this week as they travel to Selhurst Park in what is a South versus North London clash. Palace have not been performing too well as of late, but they have been swamped by injuries, to be fair, so they do have an excuse. This sort of ties into the goal scoring issues, as the goals have not been flowing for them this season either, but that looks like a wider issue, to be fair. They've only scored 7 goals, which is the second worst in the league, only behind Bournemouth, Luton and Everton, all on 6. Spurs, on the other hand, have been enjoying a brilliant season so far, staying unbeaten in the league, currently top of the league as well, 2 points clear. And they've also had their fair share of injuries, but that has not stopped the goals flowing, with them scoring 20 goals so far this season. Maddison and Son are cooking together. They're a brilliant combination. Palace was soundly defeated by Newcastle last week and could never really get into the game, and I imagine it's going to be a very similar situation in the capital. Both teams are suffering from injuries, as I had mentioned, but it's definitely Palace who are suffering more. Now, while both teams do have a very similar amount of injuries, Palace are the ones who are affected more, with more of their important players on the sidelines. Very unlucky for Palace, and I'm going to say 3-0 to Tottenham. I think Spurs will remain unbeaten at Selhurst Park. As I've gushed about, their attack is something special, and is perfectly complemented by the attacking style of football they play. This will cause Palace a lot of problems at the back, and now while the Eagles' defence is nothing to sniff at, they have been fairly solid at the back, but as we've seen at St James's Park, they can easily be exploited, and I fully expect Spurs to take advantage of that. I'm going to back the North London side to win this London derby. And then move on to the Saturday fixtures and Chelsea versus Brentford. It's a West London derby as Chelsea host Brentford at Stamford Bridge. Both sides performed well last week, with Brentford claiming all 3 points, whereas Chelsea dropped points despite a mostly solid performance. Chelsea have been looking better in their previous few games, beating both Fulham and Burnley, as well as that draw against Arsenal. So I think it's fair to say that Chelsea bottled their 2-0 lead. But they also performed well, and that will give them some hope that they might yet have a successful season. I know it's not been the greatest start, but things are looking positive for them, so maybe we'll see a resurgence from them. Brentford grabbed their second long-awaited win in a resounding victory over Burnley, in which they thoroughly dominated throughout. Both teams look fairly evenly matched in my opinion, so it should make for an interesting game between the two West London sides. Both teams are also suffering from an extensive injury list, with Chelsea being by far the worst of the two at the moment, having more players out and for a lot longer than their West London rivals. Brentford will be looking to start a winning run of matches to capitalise on their result against Burnley, whereas Chelsea will be wanting to put that stumble against Arsenal behind them and return to winning ways. I'm going to say 2-1 to Chelsea. I think Chelsea will grab a win at Stamford Bridge. It'll be a very hard-fought clash between the two sides, there's no doubt about that. Brentford will definitely look to make it difficult for the Blues, and I'm sure we'll see a goal from them as well. Brentford's defence has not been great in recent times. I mean, last week's match was actually their first clean sheet of the season, so you can tell how well they're doing. Chelsea, on the other hand, possess a very potent attack, and that will no doubt cause the Bees a lot of problems. Palmer and Sterling are in good form, and Mudryk looks to be firing too, so there's a lot for them to contend with. It will make for a very interesting West London derby, but I do think Chelsea just about have this one. I'm expecting some good scenes either way. And then move on to Arsenal versus Sheffield United. Bottom of the league, Sheffield United travelled to the capital to face Arsenal at the Emirates. The Gunners currently find themselves in third, still unbeaten, after squandering their chance to get top of the league with their draw against Chelsea. Sheffield United fought well to keep Manchester United to a 1-goal margin, and despite the result, I think they performed well and kept the scoreline close. Arsenal were unlucky to get a draw in some aspects last week, as they really grew into the game towards the end and were definitely the better side towards the end. But for a large portion of that game, Arsenal looked soft, with Raya not looking great between the sticks, to be honest. I do think we could see the return of Ramsdale soon if these performances keep continuing. One of the main things marring Sheffield United is their extensive list of injuries though. A big swath of their players are out injured, but even then the Blades do show that they do offer some attacking threat, as we saw at Bramall Lane last week. I do think it's reasonable to say that Arsenal currently do have a better backline than Manchester United, and should make it tough for the Blades to break through, although I do think we'll see a slight dint, especially if Raya is still in net. I'm saying 3-1 to Arsenal. I do think Arsenal will win this match. It's definitely one they should win at the very least, but I thought that against Luton for Forest, so you never know. I can't see Sheffield United troubling Arsenal too much, but I do see them being able to grab a goal. They do have some solid attacking players who I think will be able to cause Raya some issues, should he be in net. Arsenal have a very strong attacking force and will definitely cause Sheffield United a lot of issues too. I don't think we'll see the Blades get completely dominated like they did against Newcastle, and while Arsenal are a good attacking side, they're nowhere near as prolific in front of goal, and I can't see any side beating Sheffield United to that extent. I can't see Arsenal losing to Sheffield United, but I do imagine they will concede. The Blades are still searching for their first win of the season, so that can make things very, very interesting, but I think Arsenal should have this one in the bag. And then we move on to Bournemouth versus Burnley. It's a relegation 6-pointer as the Cherries host Burnley at Dean Court. Burnley are currently sitting just a point above Bournemouth, and unlike the Cherries, Burnley have gotten a win on the board, while Bournemouth do remain winless, with all their points coming from draws. Both teams look quite evenly matched and want to play attacking brands of football, but that's not really materialised for either side. Iriola's job is on the line here, as reports have surfaced that he could be the first Premier League manager to do his job this season, which is not surprising to see, as Bournemouth, despite having a brilliant window, have not seen goals flowing and the results have not been what they need to be. This is a vital game for the Cherries. The pressure isn't on Company so much, as Burnley have grabbed a win this season, but they're also struggling to get points on the board and goals in the back of the net. A win will lift either side out of the relegation zone and will probably give Iriola some more time on the south coast. I'm going to say a 1-1 draw. I do think it will be a draw though. Despite all the things going for either side, I think they'll share the points. Bournemouth will fancy their chances to grab a win against one of the newly promoted sides, but I don't know if they have it in them to really finish off the game. The same goes for Burnley. They should fancy their chances against a team they currently have more points than, but I also think they do lack that killing edge to really see off Bournemouth at the Vitality. I see the points being shared on the south coast. Not sure it'll be a really thrilling game, but for either side it is very important, and I think for that reason we'll see the points shared. And then move on to Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Newcastle United. Wolves host Newcastle at the Molineux as they look to continue their decent run of form that they've built up. Wolves have had a fairly bright start to the season under O'Neill, grabbing some good results and currently find themselves in 13th. I will admit, I didn't think they'd do this well, to be fair. I wasn't confident that O'Neill would get Wolves playing some good football, but to his credit, he has. Newcastle have also started well this season, currently find themselves in 6th, and it wasn't as an explosive start to the results. And while it wasn't an explosive start, their results have gone back on track and have recently picked up plenty of points. Wolves can feel confident going into this clash given their recent results. The wins over Bournemouth and City plus draws to Villa are nothing to sniff at. Newcastle have been picking up good results too, both in Europe and domestically, so we're feeling confident going into this clash in the West Midlands. Newcastle are nursing a couple of injuries at the moment, with Botman and Barnes the big names out for Newcastle, but they have shown they can perform without those players, as they're not crucial to the way Eddie Howe plays. I mean, Botman maybe more so. Barnes is a new addition, so he'll take time to bed in anyway, but Newcastle have shown they can still perform without those players. Wolves have gotten lucky so far with no injuries, which must be nice. I'm going to say 3-1 to Newcastle United. I think Newcastle will win this one. Yes, Wolves have been in some brilliant form, but this Newcastle side are very tough to break down and will cause Wolves a lot of issues. Newcastle have shown themselves to be a strong side under Eddie Howe and provide a lot of threat going forward. I do see Wolves grabbing a goal, as Newcastle defence hasn't been as resolute as it was last season, but their attack is as lethal as ever. Wolves' attack has also improved, with Hee-Chan looking especially good this season, so it should be a fairly interesting match, but I do think the Magpies will take all 3 points back up north. And then move on to the Sunday fixtures, and we start off with West Ham United versus Everton. West Ham host Everton in the capital, as both sides look to put disappointing results behind them and start getting some more points on the board. West Ham are coming off the back of a domination by Villa, whilst Everton are looking to bounce back after their derby day defeat to Liverpool. Both teams have been in decent runs of form prior to these defeats and will be looking to turn them around quickly before they pick up any more defeats or drop any more points. West have been impressive this season. They made some great signings and have really elevated the team, with Bone being some brilliant form as well. Everton's signings haven't really had that same sort of impact yet, but that didn't stop the Toffees going a decent run of form and getting some much needed points on the board in their quest to avoid another relegation scrap. I've been really impressed by this Hammers side, to be honest. Their season has been pretty good, their signings have been very impressive, and the performances have shown that, both domestically and in Europe as well. They know how to make games tough for their opponents, and I'm sure they'll make things tough for the Toffees as well. I'm going to say 2-0 to West Ham. I can't see West Ham having too many issues in the capital, to be honest. The Hammers are one of the tougher challenges for Everton, Big Six excluded of course, and away from home it will take Everton a lot to grab a result. And I just don't think they have that in them, to be honest, especially against this West Ham side. The Hammers have plenty of goal scorers within their ranks, and they're going to cause a lot of issues for Everton's lacklustre defence, I've no doubt about that. Now, I can't really see it being easy, per se, for West Ham, but I can't really see it being a tough fixture for the hosts either. They should keep the 3 points in London. And then move on to Brighton Hove Albion versus Fulham. The Seagulls host Fulham at the Amex as they look to put a stop to their not too great run of form. Fulham's form hasn't been much better either, but that win over the Blades does make it better than their opponents, so they can take that at least. This slump leaves Brighton sitting in 7th, which is still a very wholly respectable position, whereas Fulham find themselves in 13th, which is also decent. I'd be very happy if Forest were in either of those positions. Brighton under De Zerbi have been playing a brilliant brand of attacking football, and that's continued into this season, with Brighton scoring the 3rd most goals in the league, 22, but have also been quite leaky in defence at times, conceding 18, which is not great. Fulham on the other hand have been lacking goals, only managing 8 so far, and their defence has also had a few leaks, with the Cottagers conceding 15 so far this season. I'm going to say 2-0 to Brighton though. I can see Brighton returning to winning ways in this clash. Fulham have not inspired me to think that they'll be able to do much to break down the Seagulls. They did have their moments against Spurs, but they weren't clinical enough, and I do see that continuing, especially considering their goal scoring woes. I can see Brighton keeping Fulham out for the most part. The attacking talent that Brighton have at their disposal will cause Fulham a lot of issues, and while I do imagine we'll see Leno saving Fulham's blushes somewhat, Brighton are going to run riot, I imagine. De Zerbi's men will be hoping that this can herald a turning point and get their form back on track, and I am backing them to keep the 3 points in Sussex. And then we move on to Aston Villa versus Luton Town. Aston Villa host Luton at Villa Park after dominating West Ham last week. Luton can go into this clash feeling good after they rescued a point at the City Ground last week, so be warned Villa. Villa have truly been cooking this season. They're currently sitting in 5th place and have been generally quite fun to watch, to be honest. The attacking brand of football that Emery has gotten them playing looks wonderful, and that has shown in their results. They're currently the 2nd highest scoring side so far this season as well, which is very impressive. Their opponents on the other hand have not been so lucky. Newly promoted Luton are one of the lowest scoring teams this season, only scoring 6 goals so far, but they've not actually been terrible, to be fair. Their fight and determination saw them earn a very important point last week, but against a very lethal side like Villa, that does look quite unlikely. Luton aren't a bad team, they've got a win on the board, unlike some other teams, and generally perform decently, to be fair. That shock win against Everton is a real standout performance from them. I was genuinely impressed at that match. I'm going to say 4-0 to Villa though. This is a lethal Aston Villa side that is going to be very hard to stop for most teams this season. Their attacking force is going to cause Luton a lot of problems, as they're one of the most clinical sides in the league, and Kaminsky will need to perform at his absolute best to save Luton's blushes. We have seen Luton's defence just melt away at points this season, especially against those direct attacking sides, and I do think we'll see the same here. Villa's backline is very resolute, and I can't see Luton breaking them down whatsoever, and even if they do, they still need to get past Martinez in net, who is going to be a challenge to beat anyway. So it's going to be very, very tough for Luton. I'm backing Villa here. I think the Birmingham outfit will beat Luton, but I don't really think that's surprising, to be honest. And then move on to Liverpool versus Nottingham Forest. Liverpool host Nottingham Forest at Anfield, and I can't lie, I'm not looking forward to this one. Liverpool have been enjoying some good form recently, especially after claiming all 3 points in the Merseyside derby, and generally just like a very solid side. Nottingham Forest haven't been so fortunate though, with the points dropped to Luton hurting, especially in the manner in which we lost them. Both Forest and Liverpool are suffering from their fair share of injuries, with Forest looking to come off slightly worse, to be fair, with most of our attacking players out, so we have no depth in that regard, which is not great. Liverpool 2.0 on the other hand have been cooking recently, with that revamped midfield looking strong and keeping Liverpool in charge through the middle of the pitch. And of course, Salah is carrying them once again, looking as lethal as ever, scoring their past 4 goals, in which if he didn't score, would they have got points? Who knows? I'm going to say 3-2 to Liverpool. I think Liverpool will win this clash on Merseyside. As mentioned, Liverpool are looking pretty good this season, currently find themselves in 4th, doing much better than they were last season. Forest also doing much better than they were last season, currently finding themselves in 15th. Now, while it's not a great position to be in, it's still fairly solid and performances have been very good. I do think Forest will give Liverpool a good game. They've shown this season that they can really be competitive and have given some of the top sides a good run for their money. And I think the same will happen here, to be honest, with our much improved away form being a very big factor. I mean, last season, when we played Liverpool at Anfield, we had performed very well, very shocking. I think that was the turning point of our season last season, and I think we'll do a good performance again this season. Liverpool are an extremely tough side to break down though, and at Anfield they're always a force to be reckoned with. It's going to be a tough clash, there's no doubt, but I think Liverpool will keep all 3 points in Liverpool. But I'm expecting good things on Forest, despite dropping points to Luton. You know, it doesn't make sense, but it's all in there. And finally, Manchester United versus Manchester City. Yes, we top off this week of Premier League action with a Manchester derby at Old Trafford. Manchester United have not been enjoying great success this season, as I'm sure we know, currently find themselves in 8th and been struggling with quite a few injuries, to be fair. Now for United, 8th place is not a good position to be in, but if it was Forest, I'd be ranting and raving about it. Their City rivals in Man City, on the other hand, have been enjoying much more success, though that had tapered a bit recently. But they have looked to return to winning ways with that assured performance against Brighton. They find themselves sitting in 2nd, which is a good position to be in. Maybe not great for City, as they'd prefer to be at the top, but 2nd is nothing to sniff at, although there is that 2-point margin between them and Tottenham. As mentioned though, United have been suffering from quite a few injuries, with a lot of their important players missing out. City, on the other hand, have been quite lucky in that regard, with KDB being the only big loss, aside from Akanji's red card. So it's looking pretty good for Man City, and they've performed well without him anyway. United have seen a dip in their form, and while results have turned around for them, injuries and players available have seen performances drop despite those results. Partly because of that, I'm going to say 3-1 to Manchester City. I can see City claiming all 3 points in this Manchester derby. As I said, this is a very strong City side, and despite those recent results, I'm sure they'll overcome Manchester United. United are not playing their strongest 11, and that will cost them against City. You have to play your strongest team if you want to get anything out of a match against City, and even then, that's not guaranteed. City have only lost 2 games all season, and those games they lost were by very fine margins as well. Holland hasn't been performing at the level he was last season, but after scoring against Brighton and facing that United backline, I'm sure he's going to cook and pile on more pain and misery on United's current situation. It'll be another derby win for the blue side of Manchester, and maybe we only see another Holland hat-trick in a Manchester derby, because if I remember correctly, he did that last season, so if we see that again, it's going to be tasty. But yes, so those have been my Game Week 10 Premier League predictions. Praying I just get one result right, to be honest. But hey, anything more than one is a dub in my book. If you have any of your own predictions, please do leave them down in the comments. I do enjoy seeing what everyone else is predicting. And yeah, I've been O2GT. Hope you have a brilliant rest of your day. And peace.